You know, looking at my watch today, I noticed something. It's been 9 years since we last launched a war. America is falling behind. Education, healthcare, and not launching new wars. So I say we start looking for a place to launch a new war. What? We can look at Europe. There's Russia over there. They might actually put up a fight. Okay, so let's go down to the Middle East. That's always a fun place. Oh, Iran. They've been mean to us lately. But with CNN reporting to us on April 12th that with the GOP candidates in Israel pushing for a war with Iran due to the rising tensions that Iran might actually develop a nuclear weapon, we are forced to answer today's question today. Is war with Iran imminent? We can clearly see that the answer is going to be no for two main reasons of analysis. First, America doesn't want to go to war, and second, Iran will come to concessions. But first, Americans don't want to go to war. We'll break this down into two further sub-points. First, the almighty election coming up in 2012, and second, the Afghanistan and Iraq war. If you haven't been watching the news lately, there's a little election coming up for the presidency of the United States. No big deal. And as of course, Obama, Romney, and Santorum will all suck up to get your vote. But this isn't just me saying that. This is CNN's Jeffrey Krugman reporting to us in an article on April 2nd, telling us that what is happening right now is that all the candidates are aligning themselves with are trying not to put America into war. What is happening right now is that America does not want to go into a war. Gallup polling reports to us in a poll published on January 2012 that over 60% of Americans don't want to go to a war with Iran. With such a high number of Americans not wanting to go to a war with Iran, all the candidates running for president are being forced to acknowledge this. Earlier in the year, Romney was pledging that if Iran develops a nuclear weapon, he will be the first one to launch a war. But CNN goes on to say that Romney has been becoming soft. He's not likely to launch a war, CNN goes on to say. He is once again changing what he said before. Reversing his comments to a much more softer tone. Santorum, surprisingly enough, who's been the steadfast conservative and always just saying the same exact thing over and over, has actually reversed his tone with respect to Iran, with the New York Times reporting to us in an article on March 20 that Santorum is not becoming so much hard on Iran as he was in earlier times. Santorum is softening his comments because of the upcoming elections. Americans don't want a war because they don't want one, and with the election coming up, all the candidates are going to do whatever to suck up to us. But this leads me on to my second sub-point. Afghanistan and the Iraq War. Before the Afghanistan and Iraq War, we all wanted to go to a war. Do you guys remember those times? Well, according to this research, I found over 70% of you wanted to. And the New York Times goes on to report to us that over 70% of Americans before Afghanistan and Iraq wanted us to actually be involved with this war. As I reported earlier in an earlier cited CNN article, now the approval rating is not 70% want to. 60% don't even want to go to a war at all. Because Americans are tired of war action. With all the run-up from Afghanistan and Iraq, they're just exhausted from another war. And they don't want to put America into another war. Which is why Americans don't want to go to war. Because, A, election coming up, and they're just tired from Afghanistan and Iraq war. This leads me on to my second main point of analysis. Iran will eventually come to concessions. I will break this down into two sub-points of analysis. First, rising inflation, and second, oil blockades. But first, rising inflation. The Obama administration late last year passed a law, and it's a unique law to say the least. What Congress and the Obama administration did was they came together and agreed upon something. Now, well, this is remarkable in itself. What they agreed upon, too, is a law that says Iran, for any company in the world, they have to choose between America or Iran. They can either do business with the United States, or they can choose to do business with Iran. Well, Al Jazeera reports to us on February 22nd All these companies are choosing the United States for obvious reasons because of our much greater amount of wealth and the amount more money we can spend in the world. And this is causing huge problems in Iran. As Al Jazeera reports to us, Iran is experiencing right now rising inflation. Iran last year had an inflation rate of only 7%. Now, currently, in March of going on to this year, they are at a rate of inflation at almost 14%. Their rate of inflation has doubled within these 3 months. And because of this rising inflation, Al Jazeera reports to us, this has sparked protests all across Iran because now prices are becoming more and more expensive. Because of these protests rising, Iranian leaders are seeing that they're going to have to come to some type of concessions with the United States to not lead us into war, so they don't have to deal with rising inflation and the potentially that they could be kicked out of leadership. This also leads me on to my second sub-point, the oil blockade. Voice of America reports to us on an article published on April 3rd. What is going on now that the European Union and the United States have agreed to blockade oil from the country of Iran. Now, why this is important is because the Iranian government depends, most of their money they get is from oil imports. Because such powerful countries such as the United States and the European Union have decided to blockade all oil imports from the country Iran, this caused a problem with the coffers. They're not raising as much money as they were before. The amount of money the country of Iran is getting from oil is decreasing and decreasing. And this is forcing, as Secretary of State Clinton says, Iran to come to the table and agree to some type of concessions in this year. So Iran doesn't really want a war, and they'll come to concessions with the United States to avoid it. So, when we were presented today's questions today from our lovely audience, is war with Iran imminent? And we clearly saw that the answer is no, for two main reasons. First, Americans don't want to go to war, and second, Iran will come to concessions. So while yes, we are falling behind on the amount of wars we're launching, it's a good reason